All right, thanks everyone. As you're getting your audio connected, I was saying, wow, we made it. We're at the third day, our final session of the Dawn Hampton Conference. Thanks so much for joining us for this final session that will be led by Rick and Lori. And as we have said before, go ahead and keep your mic muted, but we're going to be asking you to unmute your mic quite a bit because this session is all about interaction and sharing your experiences and your input. So just be sure that you're mindful of whether your mic is muted or not. And we are recording this session, so you'll see something that will say continue if you can just hit that. And then this session will be made available to everybody following the conference. So we're really happy you're here. And Rick, Lori, I will put it over to you. Thank you so much.
Lori, you want to go ahead?
Certainly, absolutely. Welcome, everyone. So Rick and I wanted to put on this tabletop exercise today to focus on relationships. We're calling it an experience, as we have never done this virtually in quite this way before, and we are very excited to engage on this with you. So we are going to ask you, please participate. We're going to ask you to put a lot of things in the chat box, and I'll kind of read them aloud. But the point of a tabletop is for all of us to practice and put out there those things that we have in place or we know or our plans. So please join us in this. Rick, is there anything you'd like to start with?
Just to give you a quick background on who I am. I am the Buchanan County Emergency Management Coordinator, also affiliated very closely with our long-term recovery committee that is here, our COAD that is here locally in Buchanan County. We established ours after record flooding for us in 1999. There was a real void in some of the things that were happening and as we were trying to respond. So I've been doing this for well over 20 years. I actually started in emergency services in the fire department in 1989, retired out as a 30-year member with honors and as an assistant fire chief. So that was very rewarding in this. I'm also a past president of the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council. Some of my proudest moments working alongside Dawn Hampton. Got to see Carmen again. I don't like having to do virtual hugs. It was a lot nicer to do the hugs in person when we were coming to conference, but we're still pretty proud of that. So some experience with local statewide disasters to now with the COVID response. This will be our 16th presidential disaster declaration here in Buchanan County. So we have a little bit of experience with that. Nothing to be proud of. It's not any kind of a goal to try to outnumber anybody. It's just we do have some experience with it along the way. Lucky enough to be the past president of the Iowa Emergency Management Association as well. So we know a lot of the coordinators around, but there's been a lot of changes as we're going to talk about in today's exercise that we do, but we're calling it an experience because we know a lot of you probably haven't been involved with this type of an exercise anyway. We changed it up just a little bit because we want to learn from you. We want to help maybe give you some things at the end of the day here that we say, okay, maybe we can want a little bit more. So part of that is going to have a little bit of fun. So as you'll see with me, I'm extremely informal. Please throw things in the chat box. They are watching that. They're watching it better than I am because I'm going to try to stay focused on keeping along with this. So in all my spare time, I also am a business owner. My wife has her own business. She is retired out of the law firm in Cedar Rapids and running her appraisal business at this point. I own my own business called Pets Allowed, boarding, grooming, training facility for dogs and pets here in Buchanan County, City of Independence. I've been doing that since 1994 with 7 full-time employees. With that, the true form. I was lucky enough in 10 days to have married my best friend, and we'll be married for 40 years. So we get to celebrate that. And three wonderful boys and their families, and the whole pot of gold at the end of this rainbow is three wonderful grandchildren now. When I wrote this biography for this presentation, our third one hadn't been born yet. So on May Day, God give us a gift, the best May Day gift ever, and got our second grandson. So we got two grandsons and a granddaughter. So that's about me. Lori, how shall we start?
Yep. And I'm Lori Williams. I am what we call the State VAL, Voluntary Agency Liaison. Many of you I've met throughout this conference and in other ways, but part of my role is to work with our community organizations and our emergency management coordinators, all of our partners at that local, state, federal level, as we work with unmet needs and vulnerable populations, and really the whole component of how our relationships and partnerships work. I am the secretary for the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council, and Rick and I have co-chaired the COAD and the Long-Term Recovery Committee for a number of years now. So as good partners, we're bringing this relationship tabletop today. And with that, let's get started. Rick, we can go into our explanations and assumptions.
Sounds perfect. I wanted to make sure I was back off of mute again. So as we're going through this, again, I'd already mentioned we're going to do this really informal. You'll see me looking around. I've got all three computer screens up going as a backup. Plus, I've got this thing printed off. So I'm still old school, Janet. We've got the paper copies here. So there's some things that's never going to get away from me here along the way. But as we go through this whole experience, if you will, we want you to know a lot of informal discussions are going to play out here with the scenario. It's going to be some power outages. We're going to tie this into your areas of residence and your areas of responsibilities. We want this kind of be thinking about you and how it's affecting you, and going to maybe have to think outside of your realm a little bit. I'm not going to talk about outside of the box. That gets too close to politics, because Lori's going to help me a little bit. I've got a little jar of life that we're going to work on, and we're going to kind of take this full cycle at the end of all this, and hopefully this will have some meaning to it as we go through. So our simulation during this whole exercise is required to compensate for the non-participating organizations and individuals, so we can make some of those assumptions. Our participants are expected to be familiar with your own organizational pieces, whatever those plans and procedures are. Don't get hung up on things you don't know. Just remember who you would call in to make that happen. So you should respond in accordance to any of those existing plans and or your procedures. It's going to be a lot of simulation for on-scene response. I'm not sure the complete audience that we have here, how many responders are in play, but if you've got something to add, we want you to put it in the chat box. We want you to, and you can raise your hand. They'll watch for that. We're going to probably call out some people. We're going to do that in that effort, just to make sure no wrong answers in any of this. Make sure you understand that. So any mutual aid and state resources would be available if you requested it. We're going to make that assumption today. So our goal is to provide all of you with the opportunity to apply these procedures, understand maybe what your role is. We want you to understand that you're a very integral part of what you do. You may hear me refer to what we do here, might not be what Kim does in Marshall. We don't know. I see some other partners that are on hand. Tell us what works for you, because at the end of this, we're going to put this all together in kind of an after action report. That report will be sent out. I'm not going to promise when I get all my notes done here with the things going on, but our objectives, we want to identify those actions that would be taken during a crisis. The agencies responsible, knowing their authority. I always ask people, especially in my realm, in our realm of emergency management, I want you to know your role and do your job. You don't have to necessarily know everybody else's role. Know who those partners are that you're going to bring to the table. And if they're not at the table, you're going to find them, or you're going to have somebody help you find them. And that's what we hope to be able to do with Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council. And that's what I've been able to be proud to be a part of and help go along with. So you need to identify how that organizational information will be disseminated, and then the needs and local preparedness and how those policies and procedures and potential partnerships will exist. And again, at the end of the day, I'm really hoping to leave you wanting a little more, because I hope this leads you to reach out to one of us, one of the partners on this call, one of the partners that you've seen in these great presentations. I'd be remiss to say I missed most of the day yesterday. However, what I saw is just astronomical in the information put together, which also leads me to a shout out, if you will, to the team, to Lori, Sarah, and Ashley. I'm going to tell you what, this to do it virtually off of a firsthand of what we've done to not do anything like this before. Awesome job, ladies. So nicely done. So can we go to the next slide, which should be the video? There you go. And let's see if we can play that video, and then we will talk about the scenario.
Newt Gingrich.
Asked during the debate to name the security threats that worry him, Newt Gingrich lays out 3 scenarios: a weapon of mass destruction in an American city, a cyber attack, and something many have never heard of.
Electromagnetic pulse attack, which would literally destroy the country's capacity to function.
An electromagnetic pulse attack, or EMP. It's been the stuff of fiction on the Fox show 24.
It's an EMP!
But it's also a real threat, experts say, and it likely wouldn't look like that. An EMP attack, they say, is an intense burst of electromagnetic radiation. It can be triggered by detonating a nuclear weapon at high altitude, a weapon that could be launched by a rogue nation or a terrorist group with access to it. Detonated low to the ground, atomic weapons have a devastating physical shock. But detonated miles up in the atmosphere, experts say, the main impact is electrical, energy that doesn't kill people but spreads like lightning, striking any electrical grid or circuitry, feeding into them, burning them out. Whole cities could go dark. Security analyst James Carafano has written about EMP attacks.
In one single event, what could be disabled?
If you had a large-scale EMP event in the United States, everything would be disabled, because even things that weren't knocked out, let's say your car, which might be okay, but the electrical grid's going to be gone. There's going to be no way to do traffic lights. There's going to be no way to land ships. There's no way to get fuel to the gas stations to refuel your car. And if you got them there, the gas pumps wouldn't work.
Think of this fictional attack in the movie Ocean's 11. We demonstrated electromagnetic interference on a much smaller, less threatening scale at the University of Maryland, showing how magnetic fields from some electronic devices often interfere with other devices.
You hear this ringing behind me? We're showing you what electromagnetic interference is. Say this television is a car. The car's function is rolling along normally. Here's a cell phone ringing. When it gets close to that, you can see how the audio of the television signal changes. You can hear the interference. That's essentially it's interfering with the car's function.
But with a large-scale EMP attack, experts say, computers would fail, telecommunications cut off, bank accounts inaccessible. They say that's because the transformers that power many electrical grids take a long time to manufacture and transport. And with transportation knocked out by the attack, that prolongs the isolation. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.
Come here, I gotta show you this. Come here, let me show you this real quick. Come here, come here, come here. Get it closer, closer, closer. All right, this is an electric meter on the side of a house, and the meter is spinning backwards right now. This meter should...
Perfect, thank you. That is why, I don't know what the commercial was going into it, but that's okay along the way too. So we did just fine. We have... I've got to move my chat box out of the way along the way. We have the scenario put up here. I'm going to read through this as you folks are doing or can do that a little bit on your own. We're going to start into that. But this electric magnetic pulse situation can happen. And a lot of times when we do our exercises and or things like this with emergency management, we're doing natural events. We do a lot of this. And Lori and I and Sarah had gotten together and we said, let's change this up just enough that we want to make sure people are comfortable. And so if at any time this does bring back some memories or anything that along the way, because power outages with the ice storms we had in 2007, the derecho most recently, can stir up some emotions. So don't be afraid to reach out to us and say something if you need to talk specifically about that. So we want that to be there. But disasters are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen to good people. So here is my little jar of life. And I'm going to call out the smartest person I know that's here with us right now. So Lori's with us, and she's going to help me. She's going to help me a little bit. So we've got a big disaster that's going to happen. But within that disaster that happens, we just kind of have things that fill up our jar of life. So we're going to kind of start with this here and make sure I'm still on screen. So here we go. Lori, you're going to let me know when you think the jar of life is full, okay? Because you're the smartest person I know. So give it here. If the golf balls roll off of here and smash my computer, that's okay to do along the way. You think we're getting close?
Yeah, I think we're about there.
You're about there. I've got a whole bag of golf balls here if I need to be, but what do you think?
Maybe 2 more.
2 more?
Maybe
okay. Let's see what we've got here. I can go 1.
Okay, maybe just the 1 more. If you
Okay,
can't fit
just
it.
1 more. How's that look?
Yep.
Okay.
I think we're there.
Lori, when I get to the point, I'm going to have you call out the smartest person that you know to help me with the next part of this. So you would agree our jar of life is full right now, correct?
I think we're full. Yeah.
Okay, we're full. We got that. Let's go into the scenario. Today, folks, you woke up without any electricity at all in your homes. Think about that. You personally, you woke up without any electricity in your homes. As many others, you went to your phone to call the electric company. The phones were all dead. You check around your house. You find out all your electrical devices are dead. You go out to your car and you realize it doesn't start either. You notice several of your neighbors are walking outside. They're trying to figure out what's happening as well. As time goes on, more and more people are coming out of their homes trying to figure out just exactly what happened. Well, you hear from one of your neighbors who is an amateur radio operator, or what we'll call ham operator. He heard reports that the amateur radio network, there was a missile possibly detonated in the atmosphere somewhere above Chicago. That's just what they heard. Next slide, please. We, as the people, the participants in this scenario, need to decide what steps we need to take, what steps need to be done. So I'm going to go through some questions here. If they're within the realm of whatever you feel comfortable with, if you want to raise a hand, may call out on some people. Being I am looking at my screen, I now have lost the list, but I am watching the chat box initially along the way. So think about you as an individual. Yeah, type in your answers. Thank you, Sarah. Type in your answers. Let us know, because we're going to call out. This is what we want to see. What initial steps as an individual, a family, and a neighbor in your neighborhood should you take in this situation? And maybe tell us why. Do you have neighborhood watches? Do you know who your neighbors are? Have you introduced yourself? Do you know, are there any special needs people within your own families? What situations should you be looking at? I'm not seeing anything pop in. We're going to get some scaredy cats here if we're not careful. The last presentation talked about scaredy cats. I'm going to start calling people out.
All right, so we have, I'm going to read answers as they come up. So trying to check in with them to see if they are also without power. Maybe knock on the neighbor's door. Are they okay? Do they need anything?
Perfect. Good answers. Yep, I'm seeing them come through now. Appreciate that. Thank you all. You can see how this is going to go. We're going to expect you to jump in there. Yep, perfect. Getting in contact with possibly the elderly if you know those people are in your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Absolutely perfect. You bet. Good answers. And feel free to keep, feel free to keep There you go. That, and Sarah's got that preparedness kit. So how many of you have your own personal preparedness kits? If you don't, you better be thinking about it. This is going to be about taking care of yourself in the end of all this as well. So, and we've got people stealing other people's answers. That's good. I hope to see some commonalities. We better be seeking some commonalities. That's good. No, very good. All right, awesome.
So we had one of the things in the chat box about combining freezers. So thinking about how are you going to get your food preserved and share those pieces. Great information, great ideas.
Great information, because it's something we normally wouldn't have probably thought about until maybe after the derecho because of the long-term effect. You know, they tell us that time frame should be anywhere from 3 to 4 days. Not in some cases. In some cases might be several days. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Awesome. Very good. Well, let's go on to number 2, another question. You've got a person around you that is pale and frightened and breathing fast, and you do know that they do have asthma. Might be a family member, it might be a neighbor, but you have enough information to know that they do have asthma. What do you do now? That kind of takes us into the next, it goes right into the next question. How do you communicate with friends, with family? How do you do that communication piece?
So in our chat box, try to keep them calm, ask if they have their medication, ask them if they have any other medical issues going on that might need more attention. Continuing here, keep them calm, help them slow their breathing, just kind of being that person there to level everything. Yep, some first aid training 101 would be a great thing to have at this time, or I'll kind of throw out, see if you can find others in the neighborhood or around you that do have that.
Perfect.
Yep, maybe have them breathing in with you. Find the neighborhood therapy dog if you got one. I'm sure there would be pets happening in this situation as well. All good bits.
All great answers. Awesome. Very good.
The mental health first aid would be very applicable right now. Absolutely.
Nice to think about that early on. I appreciate those early on thoughts and answers. Is everybody prepared around you in the neighborhood as you are? That's the one thing about this audience. This audience tends to think like that because of the service industry and or service organizations that we are with. Maybe not everybody. Maybe not everybody's being able to get that offered to them. So good.
And one in our chat box, right? So get the paramedic. That's 2 houses over for me. If you are aware of who lives in your neighborhood or where they might be, that might be a fantastic thing to do. I happen to know we have 4 police officers somewhere throughout my neighborhood. Learned that through the grapevine, or I've seen their vehicles outside. So I have a general concept of where to walk to if I'm able to walk there.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Now, outside of those standard answers, who else would you possibly need to notify? You need to start thinking about that yet? Are you worried about personal things? Are you worried about not being able to turn on the TV? Who else would you possibly need to notify? Okay. Good answer in there.
We do have some.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Rick.
I see a good answer in there about cell phones. Depending on the type of situation, the only thing you may have might be texting, especially if it were a complete and total blackout situation, to where cell agencies, they still have to be converted to get to a line somehow. So depending on how that be, there still might be test capabilities, but we don't know. A lot of people calling on Lori. I guess Lori's on a lot of people's speed dials. I see that coming through. But it's not a bad answer. I do that too. Glenn had a very good one in there that the new legal aid app that is out there. I'll call it new, the updated legal aid app that is out there. They've done a fantastic job of putting some great resources out there. There's a lot of areas that have that. If you don't have personal preparedness, there's no excuse not to. You have it available. It's at your fingertips. It's just there. There's no excuse not to. Ashley is a little worried that Lori'd be on duty, so she wouldn't be available to you all.
You guys can all still reach out to me. That's what we're here for.
Sorry, I kind of like that. Okay. What other situations? Any other special concerns? Anything else that you can think of before we go into maybe I don't want to dwell on this one too long because I really want to get in on the partnerships. Power needs. Yep.
We have some comments in here I think that are very true. Some earlier and now too, without internet or without that cell phone that we rely on so much, how will this communication happen? And that's a valuable piece for this relationship tabletop, because how do you get to the people that you need to communicate with, especially in this particular part of our scenario, if you don't have the technology that you're relying on right now? What are those plans? So just things to be thinking about.
Yep, absolutely. Very, very good. Another concern in there about traffic lights. Absolutely. You want to see mass hysteria, which brings up to one of our injects that you won't see in the presentation, but as we share this, you'll see that. You can put a city in mass hysteria by literally shutting off their traffic lights. You take people out of their element. They don't know what to do. Nobody knows how to share the road anymore and take turns. It's a great comment. Yep. Oh, great comments. Great. Yeah, no traffic lights in Butler County. I know, Janet. I remember that. I think there's only one stop sign in the center of the county seat, if I remember right. Maybe it's on the gravel roads. Yep. Very good. Abandoning hardwire phones, those types of things. Yep. That's all interesting out there. All good special concerns. Great. All right, I'm watching my time. We are right on time, Lori. We are doing very, very well along the way. So let's pop into, unless there's anything else, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nope, I'll move us over to that next update.
Perfect. We, as emergency management, would probably, very most likely, at least at some level, activate our emergency operations center. I will try not to talk in acronyms. If I do, Lori has been primed to call me out and make sure that I mention myself. But excuse me, in the emergency operations center, you'll hear me refer to that role as the EOC quite a bit. So with that, Lori, we're going to get our update. I'll read through the update in a little bit, but I need you to call somebody out, because you, as the smartest person, filled up our jar of life here. But I think maybe we've got something to add when we get this update. So we have the jar of life. Would you like to call on somebody and see if we could figure this out, maybe?
Yep, I'm going to call on another really smart person. I'm going to call on Robin.
Wonderful. Robin, can you hear us?
Hi there.
Hi, Robin. So do you think she's got this jar completely full? If we let this overwhelm the jar of life, would this be completely full right now?
Probably not completely, but it looks pretty close.
Well, let's see if we can add more to it here. So what do you think, Robin? Thinking we're getting a little bit more in our jar of life?
A little bit, yes.
Okay.
More than I might have expected when you started.
How are we doing pretty good so far along the way? I'm going to make sure that visual, that visual comes out there. Kind of looks like I don't know, kind of looks like something for breakfast almost, don't it? kind of got it going along there. It's kind of filled in pretty nicely. You think we can get a few more in there? And so that you know,
oh yeah, it's kind of going in there. It looks like
it's okay to laugh, folks, because if you've seen, there are BBs floating all over around in here now. So That's how I was pouring a little bit along the way there, just kind of trying to shake it down. You think we got that pretty full now?
Looks pretty full.
Okay. Well, Lori's trusting you.
Okay.
She's trusting that you got us to another full level, okay?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go into our next scenario, or at least an update to the scenario, and we will go from there. Thank you so much, Robin. I appreciate it. That was pretty painless, wasn't it? Yeah, perfect. All right. So now in your representative roles, you're trying to find out what has happened. We as emergency management, a lot of the first responders have already opened up or been part of that emergency operations center. Somehow now it has been verified that a nuclear missile was detonated approximately 110 miles in the atmosphere above Chicago. That detonation has caused an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP. It's caused a blackout situation for several hundred miles in all directions. So it has us affected, just so you know. There's the artificiality of what's going on. It's got us affected. Anything that contains a microprocessor is now dead. All electrical transmission lines have been overloaded. Now we're causing electrical substations to blow up, start on fire. That's our situation. So when we talk about electrical processors, we're talking about these new electronic cars that have GPS, these new electronic cars that talk to the world. We cannot drive without being distracted now, unless I go to my garage and get out my 1965 Mustang, which I would have done already, because that's my backup plan if something like this happens. No electrical processes in there. I might even put the top down and let the wind blow through my old hair here, so along the way. So with that, let's take us into our next role. The next slide, please. Okay. Have your concerns changed? And Glenn is already on it. If there is a nuclear detonation, would there be radiation? It could be a contamination to contend with. That's a possibility. The way the EMPs work, because this is a real thing, the way EMPs work, I've been told that it's not necessarily the radiation that is the problem. It would be more of a thing taking out the processing, but that's not to say there couldn't be some radioactive problems out there. So great thought along the way. So do you know what your community's plans and procedures are if there is radioactive emergencies? Have you communicated that, or have you talked to your response agencies? Yeah, the preparedness plans. Kayla, you talk about that when you go into the old school bubble truck, the old duck and cover days. Anybody old enough to remember that in civil defense? Everybody on here is probably way too young for that. Back when I started 1,000 years ago or so, that's what we used to do. Old cars more reliable anyway. Absolutely, Ashley. I can actually still work on mine. Yep. Need to follow directions that would keep us safe. Where are you going to get those directions from? So now we've already talked about, Michael, I think, had a very good comment in there about how do you communicate with your organization. Have you talked about that yet? Has your organization had that communication? If you have something like this happen, it doesn't necessarily have to be an EMP. What if it's an ice storm? 2007 took out power grids all over the state of Iowa, all over. We couldn't pull in anywhere and get fuel. We were trying to get home from the state wrestling tournament to take care of our communities on an icy situation, trying to get fuel on cars that were almost empty, and nobody could pump any fuel. Unless they had a backup generator, you couldn't pump fuel. So things like that. What are your backup message outlets? Great comments. Invest in a ham radio. Great comments. Those types of things that are out there. Crawled under my desk in grade school. That's great. Yep, we kind of that old school situation. Do we know what we're going to do with that along the way? Great comments. Great comments. Okay. Love it. Love the interaction. Lori, how much did I miss anything? I'm trying to follow along.
Not necessarily. A couple are going straight to me. So kind of just looking through, looking for that battery operated radio. If you have that at hand, yep, trying to figure that out. All good things. All good things. It's getting the thought process going. It's putting ourselves in this scenario, thinking through what might have changed with this new information.
Yep, perfect. Now in your organizations, let's take it to the third question. In your organizations, how many staff, maybe volunteers, maybe helpers? Do you have to do some in-time training? How many are you going to have available? How long before they arrive? How are you going to get them there? Most nobody is within walking distance of a workplace anymore. Think about how we commute. We commute no less than 40 to 45 minutes to an hour at a time. That's just not an easy go across the street to the shop and or the garage and get where you need to go. So those are things that you talked about with your staff. Now, the day and age that we're in the virtual environment, that maybe has made it easier. Maybe that's made it a little bit easier. We've got some background noise going off in my office here. I apologize. But with that said, if the virtual environment is not in a generated, backed up, powered building or situation, you may not have that available. Have you talked about that as an organization?
No,
things that things you really need to be talking about ahead of time. As we talk about, the time of the disaster is not necessarily the time to have that happen. We need to have those conversations early, which is how I'll finish things up here when we get done with our jar of life.
So with that, I'd like to kind of jump in on that topic too. So the first questions that we answered were about our neighborhood, ourselves, our family, our households, because immediately that's going to be what we're thinking about. This round of questions has us thinking a bit more about our organization and maybe some response work in there. So before we can even get to the point of doing some response work, we have to figure out how we're going to talk with our organization, because now we know a little bit more about our scenario. We're not going to have the traditional methods of communication. And also, how do we prioritize that? So I already know my kids are going to be really confused, really concerned, and trying to figure out what's happening. So if I just say, hey, see you later, I'm going to go bike to Johnston, that's not going to probably go over very well with my family, not going to go well with my kids. And we just heard from Paul Daniel a moment ago in his session on the mental health in youth and trauma and some of those different pieces. So I'll have to say, as I'm thinking about how many staff or volunteers or helpers do we expect to have available, they're going to be going through the same mindset I'm thinking about right now, and they may not be available. The people we may be thinking on paper are going to be available may be doing some important family matters first before they're in a position to be helping out. Now, those who are with us right now who are part of emergency management, that's something you think about constantly. So you're kind of probably thinking already that you maybe set some expectations, or you know what your plan is going to be because you have some life-saving measures that you take. But those who are not part of emergency management directly may be kind of thinking through, okay, it might look good on paper, but what's the reality? Will these folks really be here with us? Maybe not. What's realistic? What can we actually do? Like, what can we actually do here?
Perfect. Thank you, Lori. Yep, and I knew you wanted to get to that as well. That was exactly what we wanted to do. Yep. And I'd mentioned that, and thank you. I think that's from Ashley. Mentioned it before, but that contingency plan for the possibility of riots. Chad, I think I seen a thing in there on them. Yeah, the support for the families, because that is truly what's going to be important. If you haven't had a personal preparedness plan and spoke to this with your families, you're not going to be good to anybody. You will not be good to anybody because you're not going anywhere. I know I won't. If my family don't know what to do, or if I think my family's in any kind of harm, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to take care of family, and that's the way that's going to be. So think about how deep, that depth that you need to be within your organization. What other organizations haven't you considered? We'll tail end this all at the end with this, but now is probably the time to be thinking about that. You know, things that you might not have thought of before. We had a situation out here one time where we did lose communications, and we lost communications pretty severely during a Ragbri event with a storm event that went through. So the next time we did it, we brought in US Cellular with their cows, what they call cellular on wheels, and they brought extra facilitation in, and they have that at your fingertips. Do you have those contacts to be able to call them right away. Emergency management should. So hopefully you've had those basically those questions. Oh, the succession for the decision making. Absolutely. Michael brought that in. Absolutely fantastic, Michael, for sure. Who is in charge right now? Who do we think's in charge? Is it emergency management? Are they the ones in charge? And I'm not talking, I'll talk a little more global right now. Don't think about your organization. Think about who is in charge within their communities. Your elected officials are the ones solely responsible right now, local. Yep, there you go. Solely responsible for their communities and making sure that something is available. So that's why we as emergency management have to open up that emergency operations center. Those decision makers on our level need to be in place. So I love the thought going in back into your organizations in those areas. Do you have those decision makers at the table? Are the right people there? Or at least available or on call? What's that line of succession of decision makers? We don't need note takers right now. We need decision makers. And that's what you need to know as an organization, and who will follow that up. So needs to be a briefing scheduled, absolutely. And several and often. We want to make sure that people have the correct information, good information, making sure that's out there. Yep, get priorities, you betcha.
So Rick, have you opened up the question number 4? Have we addressed that one yet? Because I'd like to tie that one in now.
Let's start it, go right in right now, please.
Okay, so you're kind of thinking through and here's some really great details about, okay, how are we going to get information out? What are we setting up? Our incident command, perhaps? What do we have? What are our priorities? All those, which is a really great responder mindset for it. I want to ask from an organization side as well, for those of you who might not be directly the ones responsible for setting up that emergency operations center, but who may have incredible resources, who are vital parts of your community for each thing that you do on a daily basis, let alone in a disaster. Kind of thinking that through, who right now are you going to be going to for help or to help? Because remember, this is a tabletop where we not only want to think through what's a response to a disaster, but what are the relationships that are happening right now in the disaster? What are the partnerships? What's our communication looking like at this point in time? So for those of you in a maybe non-EOC specific mindset for your county, but in general for your organization, what do you, who are you going to go to right now that you're needing help with? Or if you're feeling good, who is it you're going to be going to so you can offer that help? And maybe even asking for help, it's that succession piece. Maybe it's, we don't expect we're going to have anybody, so we're going to need help. To the community.
Going out within their community, good.
Walking to the city's office, you're going to go over that way? Sure. Things to think about.
Yep, absolutely perfect. Thinking on it really good.
Mm-hmm. So from that emergency management agency, reaching up to the state the best that you can, which is going to be a little bit hard in some ways, but we have those provisions in place when communication goes out like this or technology goes out like this.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Perfect. I was having so much fun here, Laura. I apologize. I wasn't keeping up on my paper copy, so I just shuffled a bunch of papers here real quick. So
no, you're all good.
Great comments. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, especially
go ahead.
Especially right now, Robin, with the whole COVID thing, everybody's gotten extra pets now. So they've got extra ones that they haven't thought about. So honest, trust me, I see that on a daily basis out here right now in my other part-time gig, trying to deal with that. So, yep. Yeah. How do you handle a staffing issue? I know in most response organizations, what they will usually do is consider 12-hour shifts, where we shift out to where you can utilize personnel a little bit better, but you have to be so careful in that aspect about burnout, the whole mental piece, which has already been brought up. Going back to the pioneer days, yep. How many of you in your emergency kits have MREs, meals ready to eat? Thinking about that. Do you have those things planned for your families? Canned goods, and it's something simple as a can opener so you can open your canned goods if that happens. No, we go to the wall and expect the electric one to work, don't we? Or the self-opening ones. And if you're only a one-person shop, thank you, Janet. That's how much we have out here. And that's always been my message in emergency management. Most emergency management agencies are one-person shops. They just are. So find somebody within that organization. At the end, we'll talk about this as well, but find that key, whatever that is. It's a program when you're talking about that. Your organizations, I'm sure, are the same. One person cannot do it all. You have to have a team, and that's why we have community organizations active in disaster. That's why we have these things you have to be familiar with, or reach out in your neighborhoods so that they know you exist. That is always helpful too. If you help one person and that one person goes and helps their family, look at the burden you've taken off of a system right there alone. It's kind of like a tiered approach. We all help each other that way. Okay, I'm watching my time too, Lori, so.
You're doing great.
Emergency pantry. Derecho taught me to have something to back up propane. Oh my gosh, we got some great comments. Paper resource, yep, absolutely. Do we have paper copies of everything that we have in our computer? I kill a tree a day in here, unfortunately. In fact, my partner's in here, my partner in crime in the office here. He looks over at my desk and just laughs at me. So it's stacked with paper copies, but usually I can find what I'm looking for. Even in this presentation today, it's not that I don't trust technology. It's just that I've got a backup. I'll still be able to talk if we lose the PowerPoint. So all things and great considerations. Yes, the Derecho was a live action drill. It really was. And who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? Let alone in the middle of a pandemic. Who'd have thought? Nobody could have written that up any better than Mother Nature did. Nobody. So wonderful. We kind of talked about it.
But I think it also, it also kind of brings it to the forefront. I think sometimes when we look at different events and we do a tabletop, we think, oh, well, but what's the likelihood? I mean, we're preparing, but what's really the likelihood? But we did experience a long-term power outage. Thankfully, it was localized to certain areas of our state instead of our entire state. But in this particular tabletop, our scenario does have us unknown at this point of how broad it is. We just know that we are unable to do a lot of those traditional technology types of methods. So I think one thing that I would kind of put out here is we are doing some great conversations of how we would move forward, but it is still kind of likely in this particular situation that we are very local still in the capabilities that we can do, just based off of what the scenario said for kind of what our situation's looking like. It might be a reality that we can't necessarily help our organizations to the same extent that we would like to, because we are physically limited by how far we can make it. We're still figuring out who had the generator where we just put all our food, and what's the rotation of who's going to watch whose kids so the other can get in to go help their organization, or who can't leave their pets. Pets need help too, and like, where's the place it could go? So just sort of some reality in there, and figuring out this timeline might not go as fast as we would like it to go. So just sort of thinking through maybe that patience part of it, as it's okay to have a priority that's still taking care of yourself in this, because as Michael kind of put in there, you can't really help others if you haven't gotten your own situation. So it's okay in some regards to take care of your own situation. So then you do have the ability to maybe help out with those shifts at the EOC, as we saw in there, or other places, because now you're in a good place to do that. So I just wanted to bring that one up.
No, great, Lori. Thank you. Yep, and we wanted to make sure that we emphasize that because it could be that mass hysteria, because that's kind of what our balance is in all our organizations, but for sure in emergency management, our balance is balancing between it's never going to happen to me to holy crap, we're all going to die. So somewhere in that balance, we have to find the happy medium. So other contingencies before we move forward here, any other contingencies that you need to plan for before we kind of get into really the thinking about organizationally outside your scope of maybe your practice or even your knowledge? Any other contingencies that you're thinking of along the way? Okay, maybe we've had some generators that have been running for a long, long time. You were fortunate enough to have generators out there, but what if they start running out of fuel? Extreme weather.
The weather.
Somebody brought that up, weather issues. Yes, Sarah, awesome. Well, I mean, time of the year. Time of the year makes all the difference in the world. Yep. An amazing fall week. Thanks, Chad, for that. That Doris Day syndrome when the weather's always going to be nice. You bet. I did it with the assumption under the thought process that it would be as it is today. So yeah, 91 degrees and sweltering heat with a potential storm tonight. So how's that for the assumption? Medical hospitals, those situations. Yep. Most facilities are generated now, but not all. The state of Iowa has done a wonderful job. We would already have put in a mission statement to the state of Iowa, to the State Emergency Operations Center for the strategically located generators that we have all over the state. They have done an awesome job about, I host one over here in Buchanan County, so that if somebody in my district, let's say a major hospital in the Cedar Rapids metro area, needs a big generator that would have to generate power to an ER for any critical needs, we could deploy them, but that all takes time. How do we get that message if we don't have vehicles? We go back to our military friends and our partners that don't have all that technical aspects of their vehicles, and we'd have to have them hauled for us. Great. Yep. Power to support medical. Awesome comments. Great comments, everybody. We will capture all them and capturing some great comments of what we want along the way. Okay, perfect. Any other contingencies? I am watching my time. I was said I'd be through with the scenarios by 2:05, I believe. So we're looking pretty good, I think, Lori. Let's take us to the next slide. And Lori, would you be so kind as to maybe have another partner in crime that I could pick on, work with, and see if we could pick on since Robin did so well. Not that we deny Robin didn't know what she was doing, but let's see if we can pick on another partner out there.
All right, another smart person in the room. I will go for Chad.
Okay. Chad, can you hear us okay?
I can, and I'm honored, Lori. Thank you.
Well, there we go. We've got our jar of life. We've got some two pretty smart folks that have helped me work on this. Lori has kind of filled it up with some of the big things. Robin helped me fill it up with some of the other things that could be involved. Chad, what do you think? Do you think this is completely full just yet?
It looks pretty full. But there's probably always room. You kind of shake it around, maybe loosen it up, maybe find some more space.
Maybe find something else that might possibly fit within the realm of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there we go. How are we doing so far?
Yeah,
is that showing up? I usually don't do this virtually, so if you can't see, but Lori, give me a thumbs up if you can kind of see things working around in there a little bit. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. Chad, what do you think? I don't think we're quite full yet, are we?
No, I think you can do another one.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there along the way if I can get all the way around. Now I will say I do have to explain myself again when I get home tonight. I will have glitter on my suit coat. So there we go. We've done pretty good. Well, you know what? I don't think we're there just yet.
You could do one more.
Okay.
Another jar.
I like your thoughts, Chad.
Yeah.
I like your thoughts. I think Lori did good. She picked some pretty smart people.
That'll look good there, I think.
Awesome. Yep. Awesome. I think we did pretty good trying to kind of get it through. There we go. What do we think? We put some more in our jar of life, didn't we? We put some more in our jar of life. So let's talk about the next update. 4 or 5 days now have gone by. Still a complete and total blackout. Now we know that multiple states have been impacted. Relief stations are trying to be set up. We're trying to get relief stations set up where we know is generated power. We're trying to find ways to haul people to these relief stations. We're trying to find ways to get that stuff out. Now we really need to look at some kind of long-term recovery group. If it's not been formed, we need to find a way to put that together now. Let's think about that. Let's go into some questions. How has your situation changed? What do you think? Sarah's comment, every emergency manager has some glitter available. There's always room for glitter. It's the gift that just keeps giving. I have it all over in here. I tried as hard as I could not to put it all over my computer, and I just did. So might not be the normal supply, but you'll see where it all fits in the end of all this, I hope. A lot of things. Do you know your role? What is your role at this point? Think about your duties. Oh, typical duties are, yep. Very good, Michael. Thank you. Now we're going to have to go down that road. Even though it seems like our jar of life has gotten pretty full, we may have to look outside that a little bit. Yep, multiple states. You think about that in our IMAC and our EMAC, Iowa Mutual Aid Compact, Emergency Management Assistance Compact, the IMAC and the EMAC. Even though those things are in place, how are we going to deploy that? What means and mechanisms are we going to do? Who are you trying to contact from this point? Either inside or outside your organization. Why? What other situations do you have? I know this is mind numbing, but I want you to be having those conversations. I want you to be having those conversations when this is done. Reaching out to one another and saying, okay, who is our backup? Do we have somebody that's backed up that's close in a certain approximation to an area that you know is vulnerable? Who are those contacts? Who may be trying to contact you? Yeah, Ashley, I do the same thing. I've got somebody over me that tells me what to do too. In your case, it's Lori. I get it, but
I'd like you to really be thinking at this moment. We are doing our relationship piece, right? So for that number 3, so who from within your organization, perhaps it's already been your staffing pieces, but you're at 4 to 5 days. Maybe you're now branching out more to volunteers, or maybe within your organization, you're reaching out to maybe past employees even to say, hey, we need some support or assistance, or doing a different route. But also, who outside your organization? Do you have national partners that may be outside of this multi-state impacted area who drove all the way in to see you perhaps, or who could do some communications? Do you have a network outside of your organization? You know, we're thinking at the 4 to 5 day point that you are trying to reach out to. And feel free, put it into our chat box, because this is where we want to be practicing that. Who are our relationships? Is it even the IDHRC? Has Lori found a way to ride her bike all the way over to Buchanan County? You know, those pieces, but think through actual tangible, who are those entities? Is it your network? Are there national partners? Is there a team that you have often worked with before that you're going to come back to at this point in time? Who are those going to be? And go ahead and put them in the chat box. We don't have to read them all out, but we want to be practicing that right now. And I guess at the same time, you can be thinking through that next one, which is, who from out there is trying to contact you, who has been trying for days and you've just been too busy, or you couldn't get it and you ignored it, or whatever it might be, because maybe they're asking you for help, or maybe they're asking to help you. So who would those partners be? It might be different. It might be Lori who's reaching out to you, but it could be someone else. Let's think through those. Let's actually right now be thinking through who those networks are, those partnerships, those relationships.
Perfect, Lori. Thank you.
So Kayla,
I do want to comment.
Kayla's already.
Yeah, I do want to comment on. I do want to comment on Michael's, because he's got a fun comment in there about a Rolodex. I don't know if, again, I'll go back to, there's probably nobody old enough on this call, on this Zoom, to even know what a Rolodex is, but make fun if you want. Make fun if you want, but a Rolodex is a good way to do it if your phones don't work, folks. So Michael, I support that comment 100%, just so you know, and this is on my desk. Now I've even got Chris laughing over here. Great comments. Thank you, Lori. And I know we're really, really good on time. Local education would be tapped in somehow. Absolutely. One of my partners, not only with education, is ISU Extension, and their educating role. They have put together packet after packet of information for me on any kind of disaster you can imagine. All I have to do is ask. They are part of my emergency operations center call. They're part of my long-term recovery every time. Know who's on the board, you bet. Great comments, awesome comments. And kind of takes us through the finale of all the questions there. Who is going to help with that long-term recovery group? Lori, anything to add with that on other organizations?
For number 5 or number 4?
Number 4 or 5.
So I have lots of thoughts on number 5.
Okay, then take us to number 5.
All right, so number 5 is who's going to help with that long-term recovery group. We know things are going to happen. We're already talking about making that connections in. I think perhaps a good starting place there is maybe some questions to our emergency management coordinators who are on today, who've been putting down some of these immediate thoughts in here. Be thinking for yourself, are you thinking even of that long-term recovery direction? Are you looking at community to maybe form some of that their own? If I have the capability in my role, I say in capability, like access-wise, and I'm not, escaping this whole thing because I'm on vacation in Hawaii or something, but if I have that capability, I might be trying to tap into you to say, do you need help with that process or where those pieces are? But who's going to help with that long-term recovery might be a question of emergency management. What do you need at this point? What's set up and what do you need your long-term recovery group to do to help you with this process? So I'll kind of put that out there. And if anyone from emergency management wants to pop anything in the chat box, go ahead, go with it. But I will say for number 5, for who's going to help with that long-term recovery group and who should be called, I think we have a lot of those in the chat box already. I mean, we're talking on the school side of things.
Yep.
It's going too fast. Robin is already noting from the Animal Rescue League, emergency management's usually reaching out by this point in time, hopefully. But if they aren't reaching out, Robin has that ability. She can start doing that reaching out herself to know that animals are going to need some kind of assistance through this process, and it helps residents as well to have that safe place to go. So we've also had some things about faith liaisons, some of our other counterparts in here. I see local AmeriCorps organizations. If they're available, they would be great leadership. A question for those of you who've been familiar or who aren't familiar, do you know if a long-term recovery group is part of your emergency management plan in your community? Is that something that you've stood up before or plan to stand up again so that you can kind of start that process quickly, or is this an entirely new concept? Farmers with livestock as well, absolutely. Go ahead, Rick. I don't want to cut you off too. Go ahead and cover.
You're doing perfect. That's exactly what we needed. And we're doing that, and that's why, again, thinking outside of that portion of it, maybe not in the emergency management role. Everybody runs their EOC different. One nuance that I had way back when I started was I had a little misunderstanding that I thought that there was closer to 99 similar programs in the state of Iowa when it comes to emergency management. I would challenge you to find 2 the same. There might be similarities depending on the demographics of your communities. However, everybody's program is different. All your demographics are different. It's about all population planning. And that's what it's truly about. You just have to know your area and you have to know your roles. So if Extension's not part of the Emergency Management or Emergency Operations Center, it probably needs to be part of your long-term recovery. So Extension can help with those animal groups, along with Robin's great work in the animal rescues and everything else that we do. They have those ties and they have those things together. They think about that. My famous saying always has been out there, I need to know how to tell time. That's important, but I don't need to know how to build the clock. I will surround myself with the people that know how to build the clock. Just teach me how to tell time. So that education piece, you people and all your roles and what you do, you all have an imperative role. You have to be ready to reach out if you haven't been reached out to. So that making sense? Great, good comments. Thank you, Mike.
Rick, do we have a moment for me to ask another question, which might be opening a can of its own, but we can imagine that we have volunteers, people wanting to help in different ways coming. So we have a couple folks I know in here on a volunteer management side of things. Without power, without being able to do necessarily a virtual volunteer reception center, are those plans that you have? And you don't necessarily have to give details here because I know Rick has a couple other things in our slides to move through, but thinking through how would emergency volunteer centers get coordinated without that, essentially that technology side, that the power, the electricity, be thinking about how are you going to do that? How are you going to ask for that assistance from others where you need it without the communication? Who are those additional partners you would want? But are you looking at perhaps parking lots because you're not going to have the lights on inside unless you have a place with large enough generator to run it? And thinking through some of those, just awareness pieces, because as we talk about relationships, volunteers are going to be an enormous part of that as well, because they're going to be helping support all these different pieces. So just awareness. If you have plans for that, feel free to remark one way or another if you'd like to in the chat box, but a component to be thinking about, because I know our emergency management coordinators are going to love if there are some thoughts already in place so they're not getting overwhelmed with that question over in their EOC as well.
And to add to that, and thank you, Lori, that's good. To add to that, if you know of, if you've had personal experiences, especially with this stuff going around that have happened that have worked for you, feel free to share that with us. That's things we can add to this at the end when we send the rest of this updates out. We would like that, because that's how we do this. That's how we learn, and that's how we share with each other to know where we're at. And none of us do this alone, should be doing this alone. We have to make sure of that. So great. Other questions, Lori?
What questions do you guys have?
Yeah, do we have any questions from the group? Let's open it up that way. Thank you, Lori. If not, we can go into the next slide, which kind of takes us to some summarizing, which takes us to some areas. And I've been made to promise that I give Lori some time at the end here and stuff too. So I don't see this as taken all the way to the 2:30 mark quite, maybe, unless you folks all want to. But we've got to, I've got to get to my next sheet though along the way. We've got some things we do have to kind of cover along the way. We do a little hot wash at the end to make sure that we covered what you wanted to cover. Hopefully left you with a little bit of thought process that if you haven't been reached out to within your communities and your programs, or had these conversations within your organizations, you can do that and or will do that. We hope that you will. So we'll leave you a little bit of homework at the end of that. Any other major issues What major issues do you think need to be handled first? Did you identify that? Did you think anything at the end of it? Communication, that's always a big one. Anytime we do any of these, communication should be just that key thing, and the backup to that communication. Maybe the liaisons that do have, as Laura mentioned, that do have bicycles that can get somewhere if that's what you need, or older vehicles such as mine, or an old school bus, such as some of our churches have older school buses that aren't electronic fuel injections and those types of things. Can they be utilized for transportation? Maybe. Those things that are not caveman tools. I like it. I like it. Safe food and water. All good. All good. And ways to get that water. A mountain bike association, there's a good one. Or your bicycle shops, whatever along the way. Yep. Oh, great. Look at those things popping in. I can't even keep up with all the comments, so that's great. Lori, I hope your team can along the way, because I sure can't. Awesome comments. Great. How about who needs to be at the table? Have we covered everybody that needs to be at the table yet? How about legal needs? We're lucky. We are really lucky at the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council. We've got legal aid on board. Josh and their team, I've leaned on them for so many things over the years, but how about locally? Do you have your legalese there? Because even the elected officials are going to need to make consequential legal decisions. They better have a legal team in place. There you go. Contacting them, contacting the amateur radios, those 3-ring binders. Again, back to that Rolodex, back to that paper copy. Can't always rely on electronics, always. Sometimes that paper copy means everything. Did you cover that? Make sure that that is covered along the way. Great comments. Awesome comments. Now the 2 burning questions I want to get into. What other relationships, what other partnerships do you have currently that we may not have mentioned that work really well for you? One thing that I'm going to share that hasn't been mentioned yet, I had in the 99 record flooding disaster that we had here, we were setting up operations in a fire station, so I'll set that, and I had about 17 people talking to me all at once, trying to get information. And I had this little, about 8 years old, this little 8-year-old boy tugging at my coat, saying, Mr. Rick, Mr. Rick, Mr. Rick, you know how kids can be. Mr. Rick, is there anything that we can do? And I felt like Foghorn Leghorn. I just kind of felt like that guy that said, get away from me, son, you bother me. Get away from me, son, you bother me. Well, thank God he didn't listen. He went outside with his dad, and he was with a Boy Scout troop, and all they wanted to do was help. And this Boy Scout troop went up to some of our city workers and said, is there any way we can help? Can we help fill sandbags? And he said, oh my gosh, yes. And the dads got together and said, you know what? We've got this. We've seen this done once. They put up some sawhorses. They put a ladder across the span of sawhorses, tipped cones upside down, and started filling sandbags faster than I could say the word sandbag. And when I saw this operation happen, I went, never thought about that. Never thought about that at all. And all the boys did was tie off sandbags as dads filled sandbags. And it was amazing. What other partnerships do you have currently that are working for you? Think about that. Put them in the chat box for us. We'll start our own 3-ring binder like Mike. It's going to be the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council 3-ring binder of relationships, of partnerships that we do. How about partnerships that you intend to make? That takes us to the last question. Did we spur some of that for you? Did we talk about some of that for you? Hardening things, Glenn, nicely put. Great. Think about that. Just learned of the hacking of the pipeline just most recently, the meat processor. It's happening around us. It's real world. It's real world events. Now, do we get so scared we don't get out of bed in the morning? No. We keep getting out of bed. We keep trudging along. We keep doing this. But how do we do this? How do we do this day in and day out? We do it with our partners. We do it with our relationships. Lori, any other comments to make before I summarize my stuff and turn it over to you?
Well, Rick, are there any additional relationships or partnerships for you that come to mind during this?
Well, as we mentioned the Boy Scouts, but I've got partnerships every day that I don't think of. We had a group come out of the Tri-County Drug Force Task Force team that we used to have here in Buchanan County, and now they're a coffee clutch, but they've stayed together, and a lot of them are retired, and you wouldn't believe the wealth of information we get from those people. And we still meet regularly with them, with local law enforcement, because they've got the key and the insight and some of those relationships out in the communities that help us out. And they're still within our community, and they still are willing to help. Most recently, for instance, we called them all back in for our COVID clinics when we were so burnt out on trying to complete and do all this. Something as what would seem as simple as helping manage traffic control at the COVID clinics, any of that kind of stuff that can be done. The mass hysteria that we talked about within communities, can retired cops do traffic control? They do it fantastically. They do it wonderfully. Plus, they've already got that relationship within. So that team of what we kind of call ourselves, because I become part of the Coffee Clutch, the Breakfast Club now too, is the Breakfast Club and the old retired boys that get together. So any of those things that talk about that, and looking at that with emergency managers. If it's not that emergency management coordinator, find somebody within that system. Find somebody, because what it's about, what it's truly about, and turning this into the total summary, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you all to reach out to somebody that you don't normally reach out to. I don't know who that is. I don't know who that be. It might be my phone. If it's my phone, then great. If you've got questions that come up, my email information is in there. Lori's email is information. I don't care who that is, but I want to challenge you to do so. You don't have to wait for the phone call yourselves. You really don't. You can reach out to us. We may not have thought of it. If you've got something that you can offer within your community, great. Oh, great members of the VFW and American Legion. I did a presentation once, which brings up a great point for me. I did a presentation once, Janet, to one of our VFW posts, and I had this whole long presentation all made up. I had it all predetermined what I was going to do. And I walked in there and I looked out across this audience and I seen all these retired veterans, most of them about anywhere from 10 to 20 years older than myself. And what an honor it was to be in front of them. And I wadded up my paperwork and I threw it away. And all I did was spoke from the heart. And I had every one of them volunteer afterwards to come up and help me in my program. And just people that I hadn't thought of before. So those are things as we reach out in communities, faith-based organizations. We're doing so many different programs for those faith-based organizations now that want to make their parish better and better prepared. And that is now people that aren't a burden to the system because they've taken care of themselves. Huge, huge strides in that and what we do in our relationships, huge strides. And that has always been my passion. So as I watch the time and know that I've got time, I want to summarize the jar of life. Okay? We've got a jar of life that we've worked on, and we've had some very smart individuals help me fill our jar of life. But if we let the jar of life overcome of us and the big things that happen to us, the big things that we start with, that's the disaster that happens. If we let this overcome what we do day in and day out and we forget our role, we have forgot what we're all about. Okay. Or if we realize there's a little bit more room in this jar of life, so we add all our partnerships. The pellets are all the working pieces of what happens within our partnerships, that everything that you folks have talked about, all you agencies that make up all of us as the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council, you're the pellets that help us out in here. And that is the part of everything that we do. Okay, that is the part of knowing your role, understanding your role, but reaching out. Now it's about a relationship. We have to add that piece to this, which is what we're trying to do today. And to know how much we appreciate everything that you all do and how much everything that you do each and every day makes such a difference to the state of Iowa, to your organizations, but moreover for your families. And lastly, the glitter that surrounds the rest, that fills in all the rest of the voids within there, is your community partners, your families, especially your families, knowing their roles, knowing your role and taking care of them and informing them as well. That's all the part of what we do. So at the end of the day, make sure you understand what means the most, and that's our jar of life. But even as full as it sometimes seems to be, if we let the things overwhelm and we forget about all the little things in here that go, remember at the end of the day that we all come together, no matter how full it is, and we make sure that we leave ourselves enough room, and as I'm spilling, but we leave ourselves enough room to be able to connect with one another over your favorite beverage. Doesn't have to be a cup of coffee, but we're still not full yet because we're making those relationships within that organization. So that is huge in what we do each and every day that we do it. Now my challenge is a challenge that I had to my family in a Christmas letter. I'm going to dare you all. I want to dare you all to enjoy more of what you enjoy the most, and that's each other. Thank you for all that you do. Lori wanted a little bit of time here to kind of summarize things. That's my summary. Put anything in the chat box that you think would be helpful for our partners. Put anything in the chat box that you think you've got to offer that we haven't thought of. Put any partnership, any relationship, any type of thing you think we can do as training to help outreach this. First time we've ever done anything like this visually, or virtually, I should say. But I appreciate all your participation. If it's something you'd like to take on the road or want help with, we're willing to do that as well. So, and thanks for the well wishes within the chat box. I finally just looked back at chat box 2 here as well. So Lori, back to you.
I would echo much of what Rick just said. You know, with the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council, we're here to help build the partnerships and the relationships. If anyone is interested in doing something like this, whether it's virtually or in person, we can explore that and see how we can help support that in your communities or the groups that you're in. It's very adaptable. But I'd also say, let's take some of these conversations forward outside of today and see where we can go with them. And with that, unless there's anything additional from our group here who's joining us, I'd just like to thank everyone for being a part of this relationship tabletop. I'm not really seeing too much in the chat box for any additional questions. So thank you for joining us for this session. And also thank you for being a part of the Don Hampton Conference and Awards Ceremony. Ashley has put a survey in here in the chat box. We'd welcome your feedback, not just for today, but she'll also follow up with an email for a general feedback of overall how the Don Hampton Conference went. It was great to get together. This is the biggest thing that we've done in the IDHRC to celebrate our 20th anniversary. So thank you everyone for joining us. I think it has been an abundant success for all of us to get together in this way when we are still a bit in a virtual world. So thank you, everyone. Take care, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon.